From the beautiful and majestic shores of the North Saskatchewan River, right here in scenic Prince Albert, this is your host, Scott Roos. And you have come with me down to the river, and today I have a very special guest, somebody that's basically been hounding me for years to make this conversation happen. I'm talking about Agony of the Leaves, evil genius himself, Stephen Richardson, coming at me straight from the mouth of the Mackenzie in the Great Slave Lake up north of 60 in Yellowknife. How are you doing, my friend?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
So now listen, this project that you have going here, Agony of the Leaves. I mean, the genesis of this has been 4 or 5 years in the making, if I'm right. I mean, a few years back now, you received a grant to pursue some studio work with this thing, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. NWT artist grant. We received one way back for the full band, Three Across the Eye. And then a couple of those band members moved back to my home province of Nova Scotia.
Uh-huh.
And so Dave and I, we had a lot of like songs written in that band, probably like 90. And so now we decided just to constantly, when we get time to like record another one, just release them kind of one at a time.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I was like, well, I want to keep playing or at least recording. So I started applying. We each applied individually, and Dave, the drummer in the band, and he and I do the recording. He got one grant to do the recording with his childhood friend who lives in Germany now.
Right.
And
I remember that.
They did the whole thing just online, never live in person or anything. And then I applied and got just to do my solo stuff, and then recorded that, finished that one, and then got another grant to do like a sophomore album of it.
Nice.
So I'm trying to find time to get that one. Got one song done. I went to Winnipeg to see City in Color and Alice in Chains.
Uh-huh.
Seeing one of my old university roommates, and we went to Bedside Studios with Len Milne, a big 1,000-foot all cedar studio in Winnipeg, and I'd found it actually on the plane. I was looking up studios as I was flying down, and there's a bunch of really cool ones there, all modern Pro Tools and all the top gear. But his stood out because it had just the way it looked. It's beautiful, but it also had like a lot of vintage mics and a lot of vintage gear, and then tape machines. So I wrote him, and he said he doesn't do many. He does like tape projects, but not a ton of people come and ask him for them. So that was interesting. Like the tape machine is like, just like you read in the biographies, it's the size of a stove. Huh. And then the tape kept coming up. So I must have sang the song almost 17 times. And then halfway through, like they got I guess like they used to bake the tapes, like to get the oxide or whatever to kind of just so they don't gum up when they're going around.
Yeah, that's right.
He had Q-tips out and alcohol like he used to use in my Walkman when it used to eat tapes, and the whole thing was like really, really cool. And I got to sing through I think it's a Neumann 149, I think it was. Yeah. And he had a couple of vintage vocal mics like that. And then I looked it up later on. It's the same mic that Lane Staley used to sing through.
Wow.
So they pick up everything. I rented a Taylor down there like mine, so I didn't have to have Air Canada destroy mine.
So then which song is this that you ended up recording out there?
So I did, when I was home last summer in Nova Scotia, I bought a Taylor off Kijiji just to try to do some writing. And I went to my hometown and rented a cabin there's these cabins I helped build the foundation for when I was in grade 10 or something. And they've been bought by another owner and renovated, and they're right on the river we're pretty close to where my house was. So I recorded and started writing the idea for the song Home then.
Yeah.
And the summer before, our brother-in-law died suddenly. So some of the song is like kind of like feelings about that, and just feelings about being back on the ocean on the beach I grew up on. It's called the Moniak. It's the Gaelic word for where the black moss meets the water, I guess, or where it grows or whatever.
Yeah.
And really, like, it's not like a beach like you'd see a lot of people, like, it looks like you're in Scotland or something. It's really rustic, hard to get to. So I did some filming there for the video. Filmed my father. He's in his late 70s and he's still playing hockey like 3 or 4 times a week. So I got some of that footage. Then I went and found the childhood pond that I learned to skate on and filmed my father and I in the pond for some of the footage and just tried to get everything both being home in the video. And
Yeah.
and I wanted to do a tune that's we're pretty meticulous in that last album, Dreams. One of the songs took like 7 years to like mix and record. It just really went over in real detail. And I was like, I want to do the opposite and just do what they used to do and just do one take straight to tape.
Yeah.
So that was interesting because you have to go in like super prepared, and then the tape kept gumming up, so I had to sing it like I think it was probably 17 times before we got the tape. But that really helped because I'll never I played live a bunch of times after that on a couple of radio stations and a couple of benefit shows they did up here for the band programs, and it's so much easier when you've practiced it that much.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'll use him again. I'm just waiting on. I have a couple of websites that I have alerts on to see which Pearl Jam goes through, or Richie Kotzen, or some other really big names I want to see.
Yeah.
And then I'll go down and try to make it a 5-day, take a couple of discretionary days from teaching and try to record a couple of days and hopefully see another big band.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting that you would bring up, Alice in Chains and Lane Staley and, of course, just hearing the trajectory and the evolution of your songwriting process basically for this last, decade and change. I mean, I've always felt like your own vocal stylings was very similar to Chris Cornell.
Well, that's, yeah, thanks. That's a pretty high compliment. But yeah, I all Soundgarden stuff. I was lucky enough to see him before he died.
Yeah.
During the Scream tour.
Uh-huh.
And that tour is very interesting. I was living in Ottawa that year, and so we put out that album with Timbaland, and so we thought it would be that album, which a lot of people didn't like, but I liked it. I found it was interesting.
That was
vocals.
his EDM album, eh?
Yeah, and so I thought it would be that, but when we got there, it was his full band. He did like stuff. He did an acoustic set, so it was Temple of the Dog stuff, and then he did Audio Slave stuff. And I really got to look back at the set list because I don't think he did any, or maybe only a couple from the actual Scream album. It was like way more Soundgarden stuff on acoustic, and we were right against the stage, so it was a really great show. So now I just got the only one I haven't seen is Pearl Jam. Seen that whole era of grunge, I've seen everybody but and Nirvana, I guess. Had a chance, but I missed out on that one.
Yeah, well, that one was tough to get. I mean, they went out to Europe, and that's when all hell broke loose with Smells Like Teen Spirit, and then they came back, and it was sort of like, this is not the Nirvana you're looking for.
Yeah.
And they kind of were, they exploded huge, and I guess fortunately for us with Nirvana, there's a really great DVD of Kurt in his finest hour. Some people say that DVD is their greatest show or whatever. It's like a masterpiece, basically. I mean, it really shows Kurt's versatility. That and the unplugged sessions, of course.
Yeah, and the unplugged, I think, is just now going to be released on vinyl.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
Yeah, I think that might be a re-release because I have it on vinyl. I just bought it from some random dude in PA that for some stupid reason didn't want it anymore.
Yeah, it's so interesting thinking back on that music, which definitely, like, when I'm writing, that's a big influence on me. And I listen to all kinds of stuff, but I still really study that stuff.
Yeah.
But at the time, I remember, like, I'm a big Zeppelin fan, and I remember being in university and going, like, so weird, like, we don't have a Zeppelin, like, type thing happening. And then you're in the middle of it, and then it's over, and you're like, we did have the same kind of thing through the grunge bands.
Yeah, that's true. That's well, now here now, another thing I've always felt about your playing, Stephen, of course, is there's definitely a progressive element to it, and I think that's part and parcel from you attending St. FX University. I mean, it's definitely there in your note choices and even in your touch.
Yeah, I'm going to the jazz program at X, even in, like, the band, the Three Across the Eye band I'm in with the other guys. the two twins in the band, Nathan and Paul, they're very much like party guitar players that would play at parties and stuff, but never played live. And Dave and I had a lot more experience in that regard. And so when we started playing together, I started booking shows, and I wasn't sure if they'd be super nervous or whatever, but they got right into it. And then we booked like 100 shows. I think we did that for like 5 years, 100 shows a year. And the main difference in our sound was all four of us were writing.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we were writing, my no choices would mostly come from like the jazz, almost Fish and that type of stuff, Floyd and different type of influences.
Yeah.
So and then we started to notice that even in the vocals, sometimes Paul would be picking like notes like that you wouldn't hear in regular rock as much. So like for theorists out there, like the sevenths or the ninths, like the higher extensions of the chord. And he was doing it intuitively, because one day I sat with him. I said, you're doing this in the vocal. Every time I play a C chord, you play a B note, which is the seventh. It's like a jazzy thing to do. And he just looked at me and started laughing. And I said, so it'd be music that you listen to that the vocalist probably did that, and he took it all in.
Yeah.
But I do it on purpose. I would pick scales that I'd mostly be going. If we played a C chord, I'd play like an E minor scale or a B minor scale based on the extensions, and that's like really a jazz substitution type thing. But it makes you sound really, really sad, which was kind of our goal for a long time in that band.
Yeah.
Well, now Junkies type band.
I was just thinking now, I mean, there was that short period of time in Yellowknife where your band Three Across the Ice sort of was holding court as maybe a bit of a jam band of choice. But then at the same time, when Headley came up, when would that have been? Maybe 06, I want to say. Headley came up for a concert, and you guys were sort of picked to open that show, right? I seem to recall that. So, I mean, I guess just, thinking out loud here, I mean, things seem to be downhill after that, right? I mean, you guys never quite recaptured some of that local notoriety. I mean, what do you think that is?
A lot of it was like we're all teaching, like old Paul's carpenter, but a lot of it is like just our approach to it. And we've thought about it too. Like our approach was like we didn't have to make money off that band.
Yeah,
we're all very fortunate to be teaching up here and having good jobs and stuff. And we were basically like just practicing on stage, like with the tunes through the jams, and just writing. And even when we got to open for Headley, I think we had played a battle of the bands that we knew if we won, we wouldn't be able to accept the award, which was probably playing at Folk or something.
Yeah.
And we did win, and then we told them right away, like, because we would play anything. And then that seemed to make them mad quite a bit that day. And then a guy came up in the audience and said, well, he was bringing up Headley. And at the time, I heard their name, but I didn't know a lot about them. And he said, you guys want to open? He said, I'm trying to bring them up for this thing. And we're like, that's cool. And so we just had like a kind of very relaxed way of approaching stuff. And we weren't, sometimes some of the bars would get angry at us if we didn't charge cover. And we'd be like, and we started like kind of trolling with it too. I'd be on stage. I'm like, I don't care. We're rich. And that seemed to annoy some people. But I just had this rock star kind of thing in my head. Like, just be what you like. We didn't want to follow any of the kind of trends. And every community has like musical trends that I think people kind of subconsciously go towards.
Yeah.
I think that could be like back home, it's kind of a Celtic thing. Tons of great Celtic bands, but people can become a Celtic band. And I sometimes wonder, like if you ever, you must listen to other music than this, but then up here there could be different things like that. We're just doing our own thing. I think that's kind of made it refreshing.
Yeah.
And it made it interesting for us. And because we would play stuff like I knew we used to have a song that isn't released yet called 205N about the apartment I lived in when I moved up. It was very Pink Floyd, and we had played it at some kind of multi-band thing where it was a lot of country bands from up here.
Yeah.
And people didn't know what it was. Like we had feedback going from my mic to the speaker to get all these, it's all very Pink Floyd influenced. and they just didn't know. They had no clue what it was. But I go and ask people, like, why don't you like it? Did you like Floyd? And some of them didn't even know who Pink Floyd was in that type of crowd. And then we played it again for people that are heavy rock and into Fish and that, and they thought it was great. So it just depends on who you're dealing with.
Yeah, Yellowknife, at least in my time there, is a very folksy kind of singer-songwriter vibe too. I mean, there isn't there, at the time you guys were coming up, there wasn't really anybody else like you, but then at the same time, maybe the market wasn't as strong for somebody like you at the same time, right? I mean, you guys became a bit of a well-oiled machine, and you probably could have tried to mount some kind of tour, maybe like through Alberta, or if you guys went back east, you could do something. But Yellowknife, in terms of that crowd, really wasn't maybe well suited for something like you.
Yeah, and towards the end, we used to do our final set. We play really long shows, but our final set, we started doing like a whole acoustic hour.
Yeah.
And that was well received. And even look, if we would have had, if the boys hadn't moved, we had a couple more years. Like I had contacts. One of my buddies was running the Alma Combo in Toronto.
Uh-huh.
So we had a chance to play there. And then the boys weren't sure if they're moving, different things like that. And just one thing I look back and just learned from it, just like I would have had merch made immediately, because we were recording every show and then we bring them the CDs at the time to the next show and give them away for free.
Yeah.
So every single night there was and we were going through tons of CDs, but we didn't have merch until the end. Like when I started Agony of the Leaves, I got merch right away.
Yeah.
But then I've had 2 kids and I'm not playing as much as I was before. But back then, and I guess that I was managing it, but if I look back, you can see if young bands, if you started out and you had a manager and all that was in place immediately, which seems with a lot of new bands, it happens right away, and they get that merch going out right away, and all the contests and the apps and stuff. We had an app towards the end. I think we're the first band up here that ever had one, but the faster you get all that stuff out, the better.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so then now fast forward to Agony of the Leaves, there's just quite we talked a little bit about some of the vocal influences in the grunge element, but I mean, I think on the song Dreams in particular, though, there's a pretty distinct Tragically Hip vibe going on with your choice of notes in the slide guitar.
Yeah, and that's Dave Dow playing. He's playing drums on that. I'm playing guitar, mostly rhythm, and the middle kind of acoustic-y solo, but it's Dave on slide.
Oh wow!
And it's Dave on all the really high harmonies.
Uh-huh.
He's doing a harmony. I think it's G above the 12th fret on the guitar. And there were some people that asked me which girl was singing with us. And I was like, which girl? And then we broke down the tracks one time on Pro Tools and just listened to them in order, just soloed. And it sounds like he's on helium. It's hilarious, for that hardware.
Yeah.
But that solo's that was an interesting story. My wife is good friends with the McBriens, and I am too now, but the Off Ice Pilots.
Yeah.
And so we were going out to a wine gala, and it was Sasha McBrien's first time out after having her baby.
Yeah.
A couple of years after that, so they were filming it for an episode, and I was going with them. And then we went to the wine gala. I came back, and I was living with Dave at the time. And as they dropped me off, I started walking up the parking lot of the apartment building we were in, and I could hear that slide solo, and it was blaring. And I'm like, we're going to be kicked out here. And so I go in, and it's just maxed. And I walk in, I open the door, and Dave is doing pass after pass of that solo. But I'd also noticed that the 2 bottles of wine that I left behind were gone. And as I came in, he's like, I think this is the solo. And this is hilarious.
Yeah.
And there's one little part of the solo, and this is just some musicians, regular listeners, might or might not, but I think we went over for about 4 hours just as phrasing. It's a 4-note part.
Yeah.
Just to get it on one part of an upbeat or something. But we did it again and again, and then every one he did was good, but there was one that was just almost like a Fish-like type of thing from the band Fish. I was like, if you get it back to what you did, and he always plays a perfect thing right away and then forgets it, and he has to go searching for it.
Yeah.
But he got it. It's on there, but really good phrasing.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've been working with Dave pretty closely for quite some time because you sort of have your own makeshift little studio project. Of course, primarily for working on your own music, but I mean, you also have farmed out your skills and talents to other people in the community at times too. So, I mean, it's good that you've got, a quote unquote sideman of Dave's musical caliber and integrity to bounce ideas off of.
Yeah, and we used to record everything in my house, but now he's set up a whole area of his house, like treated it for sound and baffling and everything. And he's been recording. He's been quite busy recording other bands, especially other bands that get grants. So we don't get to record. I was there the other night working on one of the ones for the new album, but he's been quite busy recording other bands.
Yeah.
And getting better gear and just really getting into the whole process. There's so many courses online that you can be taking to get even better at this stuff.
He's got a real good ear for arranging, having worked with Dave myself, for arranging somebody's song and making something that might seem simple and beefing it up to a fully realized arrangement. I mean, that's definitely where his talent lies. I would put money on my statement even.
Yeah, and he has like a really good ear, and I think from my time at X and jazz, like I have a good ear for phrasing, and then so we really have a really good working relationship. Like we don't even have to. A lot of times when we sit there for a couple hours, we don't really talk much. We just like go through it and bounce ideas off each other, and just we usually start laughing when something goes the way we want. Yeah. And from the outside, it look like, why are they laughing? But it's like once we hear it, we know it's right, and it's usually just little slivers of moving stuff around on the grid and just tones and stuff. And I'm always sending him texts on different YouTube videos of songs that I'm like, this is a cool guitar tone, or this is the type of tone we need to kind of try to achieve and stuff.
Yeah.
And we did that for been super fortunate, like for the Dreams album, every single song there, at least instrumentally, was used for a TV or a movie sync. To either there's a Mary Caroline up here has a show called Wild Kitchen, a cooking show, and she used quite a bit of the songs on the album. There's a site I'm on called Song Trader where you can sell your songs to like Netflix and all different things. Yeah. And so they've used quite a few of mine for radio, like overseas, and they have like in-store and in-spa radio, and you can sell it to all those type of things. But then Mikey McBride has a documentary on NHL 94, the video game.
Yeah.
So he asked us to do an 80s hair metal version of the main theme, a classical kind of Beethoven-y fingerstyle version. And then he had sent me, right before he finished editing, he said, there's this track that's used in all these movies when there's like a big scene. It's kind of like spacey and everything. So he sent me some clips, and he said, I can't remember, it was nuts, like $250,000 to license this. He said, can you do it for cheaper? I said, yeah, probably. So me and Dave listened to the whole track, broke it down, and then rebuilt our track the same way. And then, but we put in the NHL theme as the melody floating throughout it.
Yeah.
And he used that like way more in like those three versions, like way more in the film than I even expected. It's like just all through like the film in different pieces and stuff. But your ear gets a lot better when you have to break down other tracks and figure out what they did without any kind of like book or anything like video to show you what they actually did. You have to really get your headphones out and spend a lot of time listening and trying to figure it out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, now you've always got a lot of things on the go, Steven. So, I mean, you've kind of alluded to a couple of different things that are sort of swirling up in the, in the cosmos. So, I mean, what's up next for you now in terms of Agony of the Leaves and your musical projects?
Well, I'll try to get the second album. The second album is like time-wise, we don't, Dave or I don't have the same amount of time we used to back in the other band.
Yeah.
So I spend a lot more time playing acoustic, and I have a new Taylor, and I love it. So I'm always writing on that, and I'm trying to write more riffs and more acoustic riffs, and just like a lot more songwriting. And then I have quite a few tunes written, but I'm going back and like really studying other songs and seeing how they arranged them. I've been taking vocal lessons with Brian Byrne of I'm Mother Earth.
Yeah.
And just talking to him a bit about it, and just going through that kind of stuff, and just really studying vocals. I'm obsessed with Miles Kennedy, watching lots of his stuff. Matthew Mayfield, like listening to a lot of that stuff, and getting my classes and my band classes that I teach, just seeing everything they play, and I sing with them, and that helps me and helps them, and just really trying to figure out where the other album fell into place, not as fast as I wanted, but definitely, I guess, faster than this one.
Yeah, sure.
I'm trying to figure out what I have the title. I've had the title forever. It's called Methuselah Weeps, and I have that song, and that whole song is about like if Methuselah in the Bible is complaining to someone else about his girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
This age-old thing. It was more of a joke, and then so I wrote a whole song about that. And then there's a rock up here that's a couple of 100 kilometers north of Yellowknife. It used to be the oldest rock in the world, like billions of years old.
Yeah.
So someone brought a piece of that to me, and I got that turned into a guitar pick for that song. I thought it'd be hilarious to have a super old pick on a super old sounding tune.
Yeah.
But now I'm just more like, I have the title, I have that song, but I'm trying to figure out where I want the direction of these other ones to go. If it's going to be more of a acoustic-based album, or I don't know, I go back and forth. Like, I like really, when I saw Alice in Chains, I love the heavy stuff, and I listen to Matthew Mayfield stuff, and I love the acoustic stuff, so it might be a mix. The only problem is I know how long it takes to record the heavy stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the main factor now. It's just time. So some of the heavy stuff is like great, but you have to layer so many guitars, and it takes like a lot of work. It's like musical Lego.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I suppose, where would the best place be to go to hear Agony of the Leaves as it currently stands?
So now mostly it's just if any kind of benefit gigs come up. Last year I did Radio Taiga up here, and then they had 2 benefit gigs for the band programs, multiple bands, and so I played at those. I got to play the Northern Arts Center up here, which is really cool. I've been in there a lot, but I never got to play there. And those are cool because I played like a few solo shows before, but never that many at once. So I'm kind of just trying to find my footing there and figure out what I want. If I had that as like an hour show, like what I want it to be.
Right.
And when you mentioned Chris Cornell, like he has that Songbook album, and I read a bunch of interviews about that time, and he said he just forced himself to go out and play acoustically, and then everything about that is different because you can't hide.
Yeah.
You can't hide behind the fuzz pedals or anything, and you can't hide behind like the segues of like what you have in rock bands. It can just be a bunch of feedback and noise, and then that gives people time to like adjust stuff. But when you're on acoustic, you can't. So when I played the Northern Arts Center, I had to like talk to the audience, and that's something I would do like quips and jokes and stuff, just like asides, but never have to directly speak to anyone the whole time I was in the band.
Yeah.
So that was different to get used to, and then figuring out what kind of way do you want to be talking to them. Like, there's the cliche jokes, and I'm like, I don't really want to do that. So like, how do you? So it's almost like you're setting up your own little business, and how do you want to present it?
Yeah.
And so all that stuff I find interesting because then you get to study all your favorite bands and artists, and
for sure
decide if you like them. Even the time like when you're talking about the past there, like when we did that one-off show with the Jack Antonio project, that was a completely different presentation than anything I'd ever been in. And I always think back on it, it was like a full probably 5 minutes and 45 seconds of just like setting off a firecracker, and then it was over. And in other bands, like in 3 O'Clock the Eye, we do 5-hour shows. So there'd be like the whole build up, the peak, bring it down, build it up, build like it's almost like watching like a J.J. Abrams movie or something, like a big long thing. But then the punk version of stuff is just like, it's just super aggressive and super everybody. There's no time to switch strains, or it was insane.
Yeah. That was a good one. That was a good one.
And then after that show, I remember I was like, this is like why like people in that genre can get like super addicted to this type of playing, because it's just, you're full on, every adrenaline producing thing in your body is just going.
I haven't done much writing or playing, I've somehow got caught up in doing this whole radio thing, and now I'm sort of, metamorphosizing myself so that I'm almost phasing out that Jack side and just being me, because there's been so much more opportunity here in Saskatchewan to be, quote unquote legit, that I'm developing this reputation as a person that can be counted on in the clutch and be, interview and hit all the talking points and whatnot. And, I'm out there, people are offering me tickets, I'm seeing shows, and it's a completely different mentality. I think, there's sort of a culture of hipster, a certain type of Yellowknife hipster, that if you're sort of not caught up in that crowd, you could just, sort of writhe around in obscurity, with people never really realizing what you're doing until it's too late. You're already gone. You basically walked out that door.
Well, that's what was interesting about it, because like when I'm doing the Agony stuff now on my own, and then eventually I want to bring Dave back into it. Like we had played a couple of shows before where he'd be on a cajon or djembe or something, but it's like, I love the whole process of like thinking about like, how are you going to present this, or what are you trying to convey, and but mostly I always think about the word intent, like what's my intent. And so like with the Jack Antonio project, it was like the whole intent was like hilarious to me. I remember other people saying, what is this? I'm like, this is like hilarious. It's trolling. It's trolling everybody. Trolling the newspaper. We're trolling at shows. There's people yelling at us, like go back to Japan and all this stuff when you did the Tom Waits song, Big in Japan. It's like,
yeah.
And no one's getting like, we're just we're the people on the YouTube thread just trolling the video. Like just, and like and I think like later on, like a lot of that stuff, like when people look back on it, then they go, oh yeah, that's why Seinfeld was great, or that kind of stuff. Like they might not be getting it in the moment, but we certainly were. I found it hilarious.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of that, I mean, just for the sake of people that have no idea what we're talking about, I mean, a few years ago, Stephen and I were sort of in a punk project, and we did a one-off show at a Tom Waits benefit concert in front of basically all of the Yellowknife hipsters and music intelligentsia, and got up and basically just trolled the entire lot of them, and like yelled and swore for like about 20 minutes, and then we left the stage and people were like, what the hell just happened? Yeah, that was a classic.
And what was hilarious about that is there was just happened to randomly be a major New York artist or a photographer in the audience that just took pictures of us, and then I emailed him and he sent them to us. We didn't have to pay for them.
Yeah,
it's happened a bunch of times, like in the Three Across the Eye, Agony and the Leaves. Like we're different art. Like I don't look up a lot when I'm playing, but I will, and I might see a photographer. So then I go on the internet and try to find out who might have been there. And each time I've been able to contact them and get them this. They usually some of them will send you all the photos for free, and they're high quality, really great shots. Like one guy, when Dave and I played this Agony of the Leaves, he took some photos. He sent them to us, and then I looked up his biography. He had taken photos of Bob Dylan, Eddie Vedder, and Pearl Jam, and all these other. I was like, that's great, and we didn't have to like sit down and set up a session or anything. Just like, no, you can have the photos. And the same thing happened that night for the Jack Antonio project.
Yeah, well, I remember that too. Like most of the photos were of our set, and we had this like really short 20-minute set where we basically got up and acted like assholes. And I had there was a guy, like he got right up in my grill to take a picture, and I I had one of those Johnny Cash moments. There's that famous picture of Johnny where he's flipping off the camera.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But instead I like threw up I threw up
The Devil's Horde.
the devil horns and was like, I had no idea who was taking my picture. I sort of assumed that it was just the Yellowknifer or something, so I didn't think much of it. I didn't realize it was like a professional photographer from like New York City or whatever. I mean, I think, that's one thing though, like with Yellowknife, I think we take for granted just, who happens to like actually be in the city at like any point in time, like especially with like Blatchford Lake Lodge being, like Yellowknife is kind of like the hub for that lodge. And there's all kinds of people of varying degrees of influence and fame and fortune that go up there at any given time, like that there
Yeah, they're
could
all
be
to
any,
film the lights.
yeah, like there could be any, one or, two or three people that are just famous people that just want a different kind of vacation, and that's what they decide to do.
Yeah, and a lot of them were up to film the aurora,
Yeah.
and some of them might not have taken pictures of the lights before, so they're up here to kind of figure that out and test it and stuff. But I think like all that stuff, like band wise, like I always had that mentality in the eye, like we were saying, like we got to open for Headley and stuff, and it went downhill after that, but more for them I think than us. But
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I
Well,
think if
I was half curious about whether or not you noticed anything bizarre about that fella, because of course he's been formally charged and I believe convicted of oh no, he's been charged. I'm looking on Wikipedia. July 23rd, 2018, he was charged with 1 count of sexual interference and 2 counts of sexual assault causing bodily harm. I mean, did you notice anything about Jacob and how he was behaving at the time that might have caused you to scratch your head?
no, I just like we were in like extreme rock and roll mode then, and they really, at the time I was very interested in a band that like at that level they, like I thought they would just take us out and we wouldn't be able to keep up with them, but it was very much the reverse. And we had a great time with the guitar player. He hung out with us for like pretty much the whole day and that evening.
Yeah.
But like we were full on back then. Like it's so like I almost caused Jacob to miss his encore just because he was like hanging out with me backstage and just he's not in good shape, and then they had to bring him on stage, and yeah, it was a pretty it was a pretty funny time. But I think all that, even that stuff kind of happened, and then like different photographers and that stuff happened. I think it's like I think everybody's kind of bleeding their intent all the time, even if they're trying to hide it or fake it. And I think our intent was just to play and play and play, and then that kind of has other opportunities kind of open up to you, and then just like happenstance stuff happens where good things happen. And like this summer, I went and contacted Jeff off Jeff's Musical Car. It's a YouTube channel. He's interviewed a bunch of bands in his car, and then he drives around Moncton, New Brunswick, and he plays a song. And I just randomly had found it because he had interviewed a band that my next door neighbors, where I grew up in Grand River, Nova Scotia. Their band's Cameron. And I saw them on there, and I watched their episode. Then I watched Natalie McMaster's episode, and I started researching who else he had interviewed. And Northern Pike, Sash Jordan, all these big names. And I contacted them. I told them the same thing. I said, like, if you're super organized, it's like getting your fundamentals down, and picture it like you're in a business, then these other things start to happen. But if you're kind of chaotic and all over the place, it can still happen. It's obviously in rock and roll it does, but I think it does because there's someone super organized behind that chaotic person, like a good manager or a good team or something. But indie bands can't really afford to be like just all over the board and drunk and passed out in ditches and everything without, like, you got to have some type of organization to it. And then I think a lot of good things fall into place for you. If you're paying attention, you're kind of open for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I think back to like my whole history doing interviews and whatnot, I can't believe how quickly things moved for me. Like, it feels like I was interviewing like, just random, very, very like little known indie bands. And then literally like a year later, there was like Twisted Sister and, you know, I mean, I think Def Leppard didn't. I mean, I was maybe 2 years into doing this when Def Leppard interviews started to happen, and but
And the
but
good word spreads too, because like if a band like that, they have zillions of
yeah,
interviewers, and they enjoy talking with you. They tell someone else on their label, and it just starts to spread, and eventually that's being organized and being like a good speaker, and just being like not being entitled, I guess, because I think that's what kind of takes out a lot of people. Like they might go so far, but I think like that mentality, they might not even know that they're missing opportunities
yeah.
because they're just not open for it. But it doesn't kill anyone to be kind.
Yeah, well, I remember when the whole baby metal phenomenon was going down, and I had TJ go to Heavy Montreal. TJ was a correspondent that I used in the early days that I knew was going to Heavy Montreal. So, I mean, it's like I was like, well, you're going, you mind doing interviews for me? And I remember we got this, offer like, hey, do you want to interview baby metal? And there was people that were turning them down because they were these young Japanese girls who wanted all the questions in advance. And I was like, okay, we can give them a list of questions, no big deal. And I mean, they're going to be a little pre-programmed with the answers, and there's going to be a translator. But to this day, that remains the most listened to interview of any ones that I've ever done. I think that it's pushing 6,000 listens just on the Mixcloud alone, which is a bit of a, in my opinion, a bit of a clunky format to be putting interviews on because you can't rewind or whatever. But I mean, we made that decision because we knew that we were going to get exposure, and sometimes you just got to play the game.
Yeah, and a lot of that, like, there's a band. One of my first bands, Violent Lila, back when I was at Sin of X. The other guitar players from South Korea, from Seoul,
Yeah.
and the same thing. Like he's had all those contacts there, and some of his friends would fly over and talk to us and stuff. But I ended up getting my first guitar endorsement in Korea. And when he said, "Are you looking for an endorsement?" I said, "Yeah," but I didn't like. He sent me all the names of who was doing it and stuff.
Yeah.
So I got the guitar, got the endorsement. I looked up who built it, and it's the same guy that did Slash's guitar when he was in Velvet Revolver, Tony Iommi's, Richie Sambora. And it's just like just being open and not saying, "Well, I don't want to do that because it's not from Canada." So it's like you just open the stuff and at least investigate it. A lot of good things can happen.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, Stephen, it's been nice chatting with you today about all things, in your musical life, and of course, this conversation has been a long time in coming. It seems like we could never quite, connect all the dots to make it happen, but I'm certainly glad that we were able to do it today.
That's great. My son's birthday today too. 4 years old.
Oh, there you go. Wow, time flies, eh?
Yeah, sleep doesn't.
True, true. Well, my kids are 11 years old now, so, where'd that time go?
Yeah, I don't know. I think just time eats itself. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, all right, man. Well, you enjoy the rest of your afternoon, Stephen, and thanks for coming down to the river with me, man. It was a pleasure and an honor.
Yep, thanks a lot. It's great talking with you.
All right, have a good day.